Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. Today we are reviewing Fire and Blood, the brand new history on the Targaryens. So
yeah, hey, we've been waiting for this book to come out. It is, it is finally here.
Yep.
And this is going to be kind of I guess we'll do kind of a non-spoiler, kind of review, and then maybe hit some spoilers later.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe just kind of start with initial thoughts here, Sir Ezra. I think the thing we were kind of nervous about this book, was how much of it is going to be rehashed material.
Yeah. Yes, we were a little bit nervous about that, but I told you before we started, I read the first two chapters and was like discouraged a little bit. I was kind of like, what the heck?
Me too. Yeah, me too. I read that first chapter and I was thinking, man, this is pretty much straight out of World of Ice and Fire. Actually, you and I we're gonna read read that if you can pull up Aegon's Conquest here. Let me pull this up here. Pretty sure it's pretty much the same exact same lines.
Yeah.
Here and so go ahead and read the first kind of the starting lines in Fire and Blood.
So Aegon's Conquest. The maesters of the Citadel who keep the histories of Westeros have used Aegon's Conquest as their touchstone for the past 300 years. Births, deaths, battles, and other events either dated AC, after the conquest, or BC, before the conquest. True scholars know that such dating is far from precise. Aegon Targaryen's conquest of the Seven Kingdoms did not take place in a single day. More than 2 years passed between Aegon's landing and his Old Town coronation, and even then the conquest remained incomplete, since Dorne remained unsubdued. Sporadic attempts to bring the Dornishmen into the realm continued all through King Aegon's reign and well into the reign of his sons, making it impossible to fix a precise end date for the Wars of Conquest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right here, true scholars know that such dating is far from precise. Aegon Targaryen's conquest of the Seven Kingdoms did not take place in a single day. More than 2 years passed between Aegon's landing and his Old Town coronation, and even then the conquest remained incomplete since Dorne remained unsubdued. I mean, it was kind of
right.
It was kind of disappointing to hear that, but as we progressed, into Fire and Blood a little bit more, I was like, okay, this is right. And we said before before this came out, we were looking at the I always mispronounce chapters.
Yeah, we're looking at the chapters, but we were also looking at the novellas. The smaller books that he released,
right?
And I think that since he had already released those, I think those are kind of. Because when you get to the Sons of Aegon, I mean, it's sort of, again...
The Sons of the Dragon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is... I didn't go back and look at Sons of the Dragon, but I mean, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, pretty
much the same thing.
And it's the same material. We know that. I think what we were looking for was new material, and so fear not, we're not bashing Fire and Blood, just so in case you've tuned out already. There's a lot of good to come, but...
there's tons of great stuff.
Tons.
And you and I had said what we thought the biggest expansion would be, because you have Aegon's Conquest and stuff like that, which was pretty detailed in A World of Ice and Fire. Sons of the Dragon, which has its own novella. A lot of that Dance of the Dragon stuff, there's pretty much 2 novellas about that, plus World of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
So what you and I were thinking was we're going to get a lot of that Jaehaerys stuff, and that's going to be new information.
Right. Yeah. And we were right.
Yeah, absolutely, because the stuff about Jaehaerys in World of Ice and Fire is really short, actually. It's a really short chapter, and it just says, hey, he was pretty much, it's like, hey, he was a great king, and that's kind of it. And then we don't really hear a lot about Jaehaerys in the main series. In the main series, you're always getting a little bit of the histories, every now and then. Or, in Dunk and Egg, we hear a little bit about the kind of other kings and things like that. But, Jaehaerys is still that one king we hadn't heard anything about, and he had this huge reign, and now we're getting a lot of it. Even if you go back to that sample chapter, that we had the little teaser from Fire and Blood where it talks about Queen Alicent flying to the wall, and
Yeah.
her dragon her dragon's not was like didn't follow her command when she
Yeah.
tried to fly over the wall,
Yeah.
wouldn't go with her and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty neat. I mean, and it's like the longest. I think he reigns for like the longest of any Targaryen, and it's like there was next to nothing on him. So it makes a lot of sense that that's a place where Gur would want to write more about, and he seems to really like just from the World of Ice and Fire, King Jaehaerys. You need that king who rules and sort of the kingdom has to settle. There's just been Aegon's conquest, and we even had Maegor the Cruel. A lot of issues there. So a lot of turmoil, and people are still not really, I think, settled with the Targaryens until King Jaehaerys. Like his reign is what kind of solidifies the Targaryens as like, I don't know, like people see long term that it's going to be Targaryen, folk in power.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and even we some of the other chapters in Fire and Blood, you get more on Aegon Targaryen's kind of rule as a king, and kind of his governance and how it worked. And I have a segment here. Let me pull this up here. I thought was interesting. Just talking about him and his sisters. It says though none had doubted that Aegon Targaryen was the final authority in all matters relating to the governance of the realm, his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys remained his partners in power throughout his reign. Save perhaps the good Queen Alicent, for the wife of King Jaehaerys, no other queen in the history of the Seven Kingdoms ever exercised as much influence over policy as the Dragon Sisters. It was the king's custom to bring one of his queens with him wherever he traveled, whilst the other remained at Dragonstone and King's Landing, oft as not seated on the Iron Throne, ruling on whenever matters came before them.
Yeah,
and I have two notes here. One, it says, "Save perhaps for good Queen Alicent," and there's a lot of good Queen Alicent in this book, and it's awesome to get her perspective and things like that. There's a lot of her in this book, and it's cool. It's great because we don't know a lot about her, and she is actually super important in Jaehaerys' reign, assisting him, doing things. They're really kind of a power couple, and we get that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also, I said, I have a note here, and I says this was clearly written before Cersei Lannister. And again, just like with World of Ice and Fire, you have to take this book when you're trying to apply it to the viewpoint of the bigger World of Ice and Fire, that this book is written by Archmaester Gildain, much like most of World of Ice and Fire is. It is told through his perspective. So that was one of the things when we were seeing previews, like the Targaryen family tree and stuff. I think it said Prince Aerys, not King Aerys, right?
Right.
Right, because that's at the time at which it is written. So that is something that is also kind of cool about this, is to kind of put that viewpoint there, because with the exception of Dunk and Egg, I mean, the main series is all POV chapters, right?
Right.
And so Duncan, and it's all like kind of current, and Dunk and Egg is 100 years or whatever before the main series. So this is also that kind of expansion of the world from not necessarily a primary source, but someone who is closer to that time period writing about events.
Yeah, exactly. And I was reading just some reviews and different things that talked about the world building that actually does happen. You know how we talk a lot about with Dunk and Egg in that series, you get a lot of the day-to-day stuff. You don't get a lot of day-to-day stuff, but you do get additional details here and there that even some some dialogue between some of these historical people. So I think that's kind of neat, and you get to see the world kind of form and build just a little bit. Now, and again, it's only 300 years. This is only 300 years before Song of Ice and Fire. So he's
right,
kind of just commenting on the various kingdoms and stuff. But it's pretty neat. One other thing too. Well, I mean, my whole thing here, I want folks to go and buy this book, and Sir Matt and I are doing a reread of it. We're going to include it with our Game of Thrones. So if you're listening, we want you to grab that and read chapter 1 through whatever with us. But I noticed something when I was reading this, and I thought about someone like some of our listeners, some of the folks in our book club, and it doesn't have those. You remember how in World of Ice and Fire it was? I forget the other maester's name, but it would
Right.
stop. Yeah, it would kind of
Sometimes shift to their perspective, right, and they would
Yeah.
maybe disagree or expand.
right, and it would kind of it was sometimes hard to follow, or I guess if you had the book, you could just skip that. This is very textbooky, very it's a little dry, but there's a lot of details in it, and it's just straightforward. I mean, it's just it's a lot like the novellas, that we have
Right.
discussed.
Yeah, I mean,
already,
it's as as someone who I'm a history major. That's what I studied in college, and so I've read hundreds of history books, and that's the way it reads. Is it reads like a history book?
Yeah.
I actually saw a review that blasted it, and it was I think it was Forbes review, and they were like, oh, George R. R. Martin writes a history book about it was blasting it. And it's like, well, that's the point. Like, it's not supposed to. It's not a novel. It is a history. It's just it's like the Silmarillion, right? The Silmarillion's kind of a history book of whatever, and people want that. Like, there's clearly a market for it. People want that world to be expanded. Yeah, absolutely. So all about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually saw an interview, and Lord Adam Parker can talk about this a bit. I almost wonder if Gurr mentioned this again about the way in which it was easier for him to write Fire and Blood than it is to write Winds of Winter. We're gonna
Absolutely
talk more about it as we go along, but it's sort of it's the style. He doesn't have to be super clever. He doesn't have to weave in a bunch of double meaning with words. It could just be pretty straightforward. I mean, there's still some cleverness to it. There's still some mystery. We were talking about, Rhaenys Targaryen's letter back from Dorne, to her brother Aegon, and that's still a mystery. Very straightforward. Just sort of, same thing that was in A World of Ice and Fire, but it's easier to write, and so I think that's why he stepped. He's able to write that, fairly quickly, it seems like. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're right. You're writing history. You don't have to explain in detail everything. Every little event that happens, right? It's just you can just say he flew to the Sept or whatever. You don't have to say like the wind was racing toward. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like and explain like what it is that person's seeing, because you're talking about an event rather than a person's viewpoint on an event.
Yeah, yep, that's a good point. Yeah, you don't get that point of view. You just get the maesters, kind of writing down, as you say, just more of it's objective, right? I mean, it's basically
absolutely
third person objective,
absolutely.
telling you, who said what and what happened. So, with some speculation. So I guess not entirely third person objective, but close. So yeah, I don't know. I know there were some rumblings out there about just how is it that we get this book? I actually oh gosh, where's it at here? I had one of the someone had, here it is. Okay, so Tor.com, Chris Lowe here had kind of said, Fire and Blood is the best Song of Ice and Fire book in 18 years, but will anyone read it? Is his question. I thought it was kind of a,
right.
It's pretty cool. I mean that it is one of the best. It's great. I love everything about it. We said we were discouraged in the beginning, but once you get to this new content, it's fantastic, and it actually just continues to build and add to the world. But is anyone going to read it, or are people going to sit down and this is for the fans, though. This is what I
absolutely
argue. It's not to bring more people into the series. I think it's the series is already blown up and people are into it. They're reading it. They're watching the show, and this is supplemental. So.
Right, this book isn't designed to tell us, like, hey, what's the secret behind the White Walkers? What's, who's Jon Snow's parents?
Right.
that's not what this is about. This is about expanding the world, building the world. Because also think about it, is that the world's about to get expanded a lot more with the new HBO series. Game of Thrones, the TV show, is ending.
Yep.
It has next April, it's coming back. It's probably going to be over in May. And so, that's it. And then, we're done with the HBO series, the books, there's only 2 books left. But we're going to get that prequel. We're going to get more stuff in that world. It's, it's starting to, this is going to help build the foundation for the bigger world, Song of Ice and Fire series.
Well, and here you're absolutely right, because I've read a couple interviews where is it who are the authors? Elio and well, the author is Linda, right, of World of Ice and Fire. They talk about the idea there was a need for George to kind of pencil down, to put down, check the dates, and just he had so much history laced into his Song of Ice and Fire series that like they didn't want it to be contradictory. He's still writing that series, and so it makes it better when he in his mind has really good foundation and a good history to kind of launch from, because he's talking about the Dawn Age, and then he'll reference something in Targaryen history, and then he'll go back to the Age of Heroes. He does all of that in A Song of Ice and Fire, and he did all of that before World of Ice and Fire was out. So he had all these things in his mind, and he needed to kind of set it down in writing. Tolkien, kind of was in the opposite fashion, had the histories written down, and then from that wrote the Lord of the Rings or whatever. But it's there's a need for that. He needed to go back and make sure these things were solid, so that way everything kind of connects. And that's, the more I read the series too, everything does connect. We're blown away by the Lady Stoneheart reference in a Game of Thrones. Heart, turning to stone, and it's like the foundation's laid right there. So he's a guy who I think he needed this, and he wanted to, not just do this for the fans, but it's stuff he already has down. He's already got that backstory. So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But okay. So I think we wanted to. Do we want to do a couple passages? Do we want to turn to spoiler territory here?
Yeah, just some stuff I thought was cool. So I already kind of read one, but I kind of want to read another. Well, I have a couple more here. I want to read this one. This is in the Aegon kind of ruling chapter, right, with him and his sister, and talking about the governance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It is better to forestall rebellions than to put them down. Aegon famously said when asked the reason for his journeys, why he is traveling around. A glimpse of the king and all his power mounted on Balerion the Black Dread, and attended by hundreds of knights glittering in silk and steel, did much to instill loyalty in the restless lords. The small folk needed to see kings and queens from time to time as well, the king added, and know that they might have the chance to lay their grievances and concerns before him. And so they did. Much of every royal progress was given over to feasts and balls and hunts and hawking, as every lord attempted to outdo the others in splendor and hospitality. But Aegon also made a point of holding court wherever he might travel. And I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. Each of the conquered kingdoms had its own laws and traditions. King Aegon did little to interfere with those. He allowed his lords to continue to rule much as they always had, with the same powers and prerogatives. The laws of inheritance and succession remained unchanged. The existing feudal structures were confirmed. Lords, both great and small, retained the power of pit and gallows on their own land. And then it goes on and on. But it I can see why people think it's kind of dry, but it's kind of cool is that we're getting that this is something we don't really get a lot of how Aegon rules in World of Ice and Fire, and it's gonna be kind of interesting, because I'm gonna have to go out on a limb here and say there's no way that one of those prequel shows isn't Aegon's Conquest that they're working on. That seems to me like that's gotta be one of them.
Yeah, it's gotta be one of them for sure. Absolutely. I'm with you on that, because I don't know how much you can do, or how long the Age of Heroes stuff will be.
Right.
You could do a lot with it for sure, but it also depends on its success too. You can hold off on Aegon's Conquest. This could go on for another decade or so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Aegon would be a super cool character to do, because you could do 5 or 6 seasons. You could do him and his sister as kind of as a kid, as he begins to turn his sight. He fights wars over in Valyria and in Essos and stuff like that, and so then kind of focus on his turning his conquest, and then kind of him as a king.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Let me. Now this is major spoiler here. Okay. So if you guys don't want some stuff spoiled, because for me, I as I said, the first 2 chapters straightforward, and then as soon as I jumped into the Jaehaerys stuff, it's just littered with new. Everything about it is brand new. So if you're looking just to fast forward through the King Aegon and Aenys and Maekor, then that's fine. Skip right to Jaehaerys. It's totally cool. Here we go, man. Okay, so you had just mentioned that Aegon, when he was like he did that, what do you call it? Like the tour, he's traveling from various keeps and things. So and he's sitting in court, and Jaehaerys decides to do the same thing, right? So he saw that as something that was important, and he takes Queen Alysanne with him, and this is super cool. So he's actually headed to. I'm just kind of giving you some background here before I start reading. To Maidenpool, I believe it is, and so they ride there. Everything goes smooth. They get there, and so the journey went without incident until the king and queen reached Maidenpool, where they would be guests of Lord and Lady Mooten for a fortnight before sailing across the Bay of Crabs to Wickenden, Galltown, and the Vale. The town of Maidenpool was far famed for Sweetwater Pool, where legend had it that Florian the Fool had first glimpsed Jonquil bathing during the Age of Heroes. So you get this, maiden pool, and you get this famous pool of water that she's going to go bathe in. Queen Alysanne wants to bathe in it, and it's like got these healing properties and powers. It's, pretty cool. So she had this fancy to go there. The lords of Maidenpool had erected a great stone bathhouse around the pool many centuries before and given it over to the Order of Holy Sisters. No men were allowed to enter the premises, so when the queen slipped into the sacred waters, she was attended by only her ladies-in-waiting, maids and septas. Okay, and these septas, and this is actually kind of neat because they bring in the faith a little bit as well, and it's littered throughout all of this. We had talked about this in A World of Ice and Fire, the relationship between the Targaryens and Old Town, because, well, I mean, so the Sept, right? Because of the ancestral marriages and things, correct? And Aegon has two wives, and that's ticking off the high Septon. So, all right, so they, she's in here, right? And let's see, what does it say here? So the goodness of the little queen and the silence of the starry sept and the extortions of the seven speakers had won over most of the faithful for Jaehaerys and his Alysanne. So some Targaryens and some of their people close to them had actually converted to the faith and had tried to restore this relationship. But there were always some who will not be moved. And amongst the sisters who attended Jonquil's pool were 3 such women. So she goes in surrounded by some of her ladies-in-waiting and these septas, and their hearts were hard with hate. They told one another that their holy water would be polluted forever were the queen allowed to bathe in them whilst carrying the king's abomination in her belly. So she's pregnant at the time with Jaehaerys' child. So Queen Alysanne had only slipped in out of her clothing when they fell upon her with daggers they had concealed within their robes. And so there's this, what caught my eyes, I'm flipping through the photo, and we'll have to post this in the group, but it's like, 3 women, and they're like naked bathing in this pool, and these septas come out and daggers.
That caught your eye?
That caught my eye. Yeah. It's well illustrated, my friend. It's well illustrated.
Right.
And so anyways, a couple of her ladies in waiting are killed. And so let me skip down here a bit. Jaehaerys was furious. Their visit to the Vale was postponed. Instead, they returned to the safety of Maegor's Holdfast. Queen Alysanne would remain there until her child was born. But the experience had shaken her and set her to pondering. Quote, "I need a protector of my own," she told his grace. "Your 7 are leal men and valiant, but they are men, and there are places men cannot go." The king did not disagree. A raven flew to Duskendale that very night, commanding the new Lord Darkland to send to court his bastard half-sister, Jonquil Dark, who thrilled the small folk during the War for the White Cloaks as the Mystery Knight, known as the Serpent in Scarlet. Still in scarlet, she arrived in King's Landing a few days later and gladly accepted the appointment as the Queen's own sworn shield. In time, she would be known to the realm as the Scarlet Shadow. Just kind of cool stuff, she's got her own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's just, I don't know. It's badass. It's really kind of neat to see. That's a perfect example. She needs her own protection, and you've got the Kingsguard, but they can't go everywhere. So she's in this sacred bathhouse, and is killed. So, kind of just I thought it was really neat. It made sense too because what we know about Alysanne is that she is sort of progressive, right? I mean, she disagrees with the Great Council of 101. When Jaehaerys sort of says that the crown passes to his grandson instead of his granddaughter. He says that the male line should kind of continue, and Alysanne leaves him because of that. Separate. We talked about that's not spoiler. That's we know that from A World of Ice and Fire. They reconcile. There's the reconciliation, but she's very progressive, and so to get her own private sworn shield, who is a woman, this bastard half sister of Lord Darkland, there is really cool in my opinion. So
no, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I got one more here. I kind of want to read, and this is during the Hour of the Wolf.
Okay.
Right, which is later when Lord Cregan Stark sits as regent, kind of hand of the king there for Aegon the Third, right? Aegon the Younger, right? The little one, and he just kind of is conducting business for this period of time. Because remember, he marches south with like an army, right? He like marches south with an army, and then they kind of take they kind of hold court.
Yeah.
As armies marched and swords were sharpened, Lord Cregan Stark sat within the Red Keep, conducting his inquiries into the murder of King Aegon II, even as he planned his campaign against the dead king's remaining supporters. Prince Aegon, meanwhile, found himself confined to Maegor's Holdfast with no companions save the boy Gaiman Palehair. When the prince demanded to know why he was not free to come and go, Stark replied that it was for his own safety. This city is a nest of vipers, Lord Cregan told him. There are liars, turncloaks, and poisoners in this court who would murder you as quick as they did your uncle to secure their own power. When Aegon protested that Lord Corlys, Lord Larys, and Sir Perkin were friends, the Lord of Winterfell replied that false friends were more dangerous to a king than any foe, that the snake, the clubfoot, and the flea had saved him only to make use of him, so that they may rule Westeros in his name.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty sweet. Is that you have Craig and Stark, because in World of Ice and Fire we just kind of get that he just was there, right? It's this super cool thing. It's called like the Hour of the Wolf, right? Yep. And
and you get more of his mindset and his
and it goes on after that for a bit.
Okay, awesome. Around that same time, so right before the time that you were talking about, I had something just real quickly here. It's on like 493. Great picture caught my attention. What's cool is as you flip through this, you'll see all sorts of well illustrated black and white illustrations. Let me see if on the front does it say illustrations by Doug Wheatley. So those are fantastic. You guys need to check those out. The Dead Shepherd is this character who basically is in the streets, kind of preaching against the dragons. So those who heard him preach, like those who would later record his infamy, knew him only as a shepherd. Mushroom named him the Dead Shepherd, for he claimed the man was pale and foul as a corpse, fresh risen from its grave. And what's interesting is it looks like his arm, he's had his hand cut off, and they say, that could be an indication that he was a robber at one point, so he lost a hand for robbing, and maybe it was robbing, giving to the poor. Who knows what it might have been. But he preached that dragons were unnatural creatures. Demons summoned from the pits of the seven hells by the fell sorceries of Valyria. He kind of goes on. He continues just to kind of call them down, and he mocks the dragons and the Targaryens. Each hour his crowd grew. A dozen listeners became a score, and then 100. And by the break of dawn, thousands were crowding into the square, shoving and pushing as they strained to hear. Many clutched torches, and by nightfall the shepherd stood amidst a ring of fire. Those who tried to shout him down were savaged by the crowd. Even the gold cloaks were driven off when 40 men attempted to clear the square at spear point. And so I'll leave you there because there's more to it, but don't want to spoil all of it for you. But it's a cool little connection to the faith, kind of coming back again. We just talked about Queen Alysanne, and Jaehaerys trying to reconcile things with the faith, and now you've got more of these, as kind of a the Dead Shepherd here coming back. And actually, what you get a connection to isn't the Oh man, the guy in the main series, isn't there a shepherd? A guy who comes in and sort of restores, brings the faith militant back,
right,
kind of thing. So it's kind of
yep.
a little bit of a parallel, and so I thought that was interesting. But because we don't, the relationship is strained, and so we see this back and forth. And the way I look at it too, it's where the seven, are often brought up, and you get a better understanding of their beliefs, of their system, their faith, and their opposition to the Targaryens. I mean, kind of quiet sometimes, and then it surges forward, and then they're cowed, and then back and forth. But I don't know, kind of a neat little couple neat passages. Just wanted to kind of there's tons more. I mean, tons of cool stuff.
Yeah, and I mean earlier we had said with Fire and Blood, there's definitely going to be some repeat material in here. But we know that we're getting a Fire and Blood Part 2 at some point. I'm guessing that's probably 2 to 3 years from now at the earliest.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be a lot more new information.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's still great. I mean, I wouldn't view it as an entirely new book. I would view it as an expansion to, say, like a World of Ice and Fire is how I kind of view it.
Yeah, exactly. And Sir Matt had mentioned too that watch the wiki, because that'll be getting updated, I'm sure. They've got a large task ahead of them to kind of update some of this.
Absolutely, yeah.
The names that are littered in here too, just more names from different houses. The trees just keep getting the family trees just get bigger and bigger. Connection to like on the back, and if you have the hard copy of this book, in the back of the book you have the Targaryen succession, and that's pretty neat. Kind of gives you a quick little rundown of all the kings and who kind of came after who, and it's pretty neat. There's also like a nice little handwritten Targaryen lineage there for the royal family, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is really cool. So if you get a chance to look at that, you definitely should. So I think just final thoughts, Sir Matt.
It's good. I'm ready to dive more into it. It's a great another addition to this song of Ice and Fire. I kind of just view it. To me, it's more just it's another instrument in the song rather than like another section of the song. Is kind of how I view it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I get you. Well, and I'm with you on that. Yeah, it's just it adds to the world. It's definitely something that there's some new, there's some rehash, but it's fantastic. If you're into the detail and you want to kind of theorize and think about some of these old families, and look at how the shift in power, and I think the wheel is coming full circle. By the end of this series, I think you could have back to actually 7 to 6 kingdoms. You could have multiple kings. You could have one person sitting on the Iron Throne. And so if you like to think about those things and theorize, then this is a good book for you to kind of go and look for parallels between the histories and the main series there. So I would definitely go buy it. I would check it out. Sir Matt and I, as I said at the top of the show, we are going to take it chapter by chapter. That'll be in our Maester study of our main show, and so if you're interested in that, we'll kind of rehash it as much as we can, go into the details, dive in there with you guys. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, guys. Hey, as always, thanks for listening, and just remember that winter is coming.